So the talk right now is that Spider-Man 2 is a very short game or mid-range game, I guess. I don't really know how anybody can actually put, some kind of a metric as to what is long or what is short, seeing that everybody is going to approach and play a game differently, especially people who are going to try to play the game on a harder difficulty. But let's look at the pertaining information and data out there, and let's see if, in my opinion, this is actually something worth bothering about, or in full context, this may be something that people may want to pay attention to or people are responding to in a specific way. So, here on Twitter, an account run by a person that named it Darius Fears pretty much posts and says, wow, apparently it took this user here 15.3 hours to beat Marvel Spider-Man 2 main story and around 26 hours to platinum the entire game. Spider-Man 2 PS5 is a very short game. In my opinion, it's not worth the $70+ like I've said before. I will beat Spider-Man 2 in 2 play sessions max. Now, I remember that there's some context around this particular account saying that they thought they were going to beat Spider-Man 2 in literally 2 play sessions and they were going to go to their cousin's house and play it. That's pretty much the context of this. But also saying that 26 hours to platinum a game is very short is only from the perspective of one person that has played the game. Usually this is going to vary a lot, and I'm not necessarily, in my opinion anyways, I don't necessarily care about the length of a game. In fact, many of you have heard on this channel that I actually did like Miles Morales, and one of the reasons I liked it was because it was short. However, I've heard some other friends, or other colleagues say to me that they didn't really like Miles Morales because of the, length and the brevity of the game. I thought it was genius. Make a small game, get it out there, continue to dabble into, your future titles, and that's one way to do it. So when we look at all of this, I think some other things that did come into the conversation were things like, okay, what is the length of, say, possibly other video games that have been in this genre? And I started to go around to see what people were saying and to kind of like, in my opinion anyways, evaluate all of that in perspective. Because at the end of the day, though, you really have to look and say, okay, what have other games been doing? Now, apparently, somebody over here named Mighty Keef, apparently this is a YouTuber as well, who makes a lot of interesting content. I've seen some of his stuff. I didn't even know it was him for the longest time because he's got dreads on his Twitter post and on his videos. He goes by, a low cut. And so he posted the Arkham games and the time frame to beat them and also get in the completionist side. So you're looking at an average of, well, it's not going to be a good average because the different games are small, compared to the much, or the older games are smaller compared to the much newer games in a sense. So Batman Arkham Asylum, 25 hours for a completionist run. Arkham City, 57 hours. Arkham City does have a lot of really interesting stuff, though, with all the, puzzles and the riddles. So, yes, I can see how that really does extend the game for the completionist run to go to 57 hours. Yikes. And then Arkham Knight has about 31 hours for the main story plus extra. In this case, I mean, I'm looking at even the stories themselves, 16 and a half hours, 13 and a half hours, 11, hours, and then completionist run being 50 hours. And in this case, completionist run being 40 and a half hours for Arkham Origins. Now, it looks like on paper that, the Arkham games seem to be much longer, but in reality, the way the Arkham games structured the Riddler puzzles, they kind of put you in a place where you're just constantly playing the game and you just almost seem like you're not going to make any headway because the Riddler puzzles are just kind of bogus in a sense. They're very well infamous and hated by a lot of people, so I don't really think those Riddler puzzles and the fact that you have to drive from one part of town like in the Arkham games and go destroy one thing and then make sure you do all this, all that's kind of activity, whereas in the Insomniac Spider-Man game, having played, the first one in Miles Morales, I didn't complete those two, but seeing the way side activities were set up in those games, they're set up for easy accessibility. So it doesn't really make, in my opinion anyways, a good comparison. I think he was making this point to kind of show, the brevity of the game in totality, like, the main story and all that. But I don't think it really helps his case because those games you just run all over the place, and Insomniac's game, you go straight to the objective for the most part. Is sitting there and it's just trying to show you like, hey, come here and get this job done. So I think the design of both games in terms of progression, are not necessarily a big deal. And to me, I don't really mind this brevity. Some of you know that I said, I'm going to boycott the game day one, but it's a game that I look forward to playing later down the road because of Sony's BS and their copyright nonsense. But that aside, The next question, though, is the $70 price tag that is actually being put on top of this. Because now, if we go back and evaluate these other games, as well as the 2018 game, which is actually reportedly similar in length to the Spider-Man 2 game that's coming out this year, the $70 price tag versus the $60 price tag at the time is where some people seem to have a hold up of some kind. If you think about it, that's the one thing that you basically will see come up in this particular post. And, that is the matter of the $70 price tag. Now, the $70 price tag is kind of inflammatory in a sense because everybody, or most people anyways, interpret it differently. Some people are like, it's $10. I don't care. All of you need to shut up and move aside. I mean, I've heard that perspective before. Some people have said, well, the cost of gas and eggs are higher, so $70 seems justified, and so on and so forth. In my opinion, I think $70 is artificially inflated. Games have cost more than $60 in the past, and even more than $70 in the past. So if anybody was to say, oh, well, game prices as of today are keeping up with inflation, they're basically blowing smoke, because it doesn't really make any sense that the prices went all the way down and stayed at $60 forever. And then when game demand went high in 2020, during the time everybody was staying home, somehow the CEOs were like, hey, we need to increase the price of games. And then all of a sudden these studios started to increase their price, while at the same time some other publishers like Ubisoft is not increasing the price for their Assassin's Creed game, which is a shorter Assassin's Creed game. So it really makes no sense to me that, one company is able to, pretty much absorb those costs, even though their development costs are just as high as Insomniac or all these other studios charging $70. So the scales are all over the place. To me, I just think it's a studio or a publisher's preference to throw the price tag out there. And some publishers are going ahead for it. Some publishers are not. If you think about, say, From Software, they're keeping their prices seemingly standard. If you think about, say, even some, publishers like Capcom, they seem to be keeping their, their prices standard. And so we're going to see a disparity along the, across the board as to, these $70 games and, the price point and the price tag. So at the end of the day, it just all comes down to the individual themselves. I don't really think this should be, something that a general audience needs to throw a big, huge party around. I mean, to me, a short Spider-Man game is a game that will try its best to keep you engaged all through the while. The Arkham games, they were engaging because you didn't necessarily have to do too much until you finish the story. Then you could go do your Riddler trophies and all of that stuff. In fact, the game will probably not even allow for you to be able to access areas until you had actually reached heavy, aspects of progression, because the developers understood if you tried to maybe mix in everything with your run, you'd probably be in a very frustrated position. And so that's why they kind of allowed for you to kind of, in a sense, progress heavily and even maybe complete the story before you started doing all of that. In the case of Insomniac, who uses what I think are much more straightforward side objectives and completionist objects or objectives in a sense, I think it makes sense that their game is going to be somewhere around 30 hours or whatever. I mean, for some people, it's going to take longer. So I don't necessarily see a big deal in there. And as for $70, that's up to, whomever wants to buy the game. It doesn't concern me at all. I'm just saying, that there are different perspectives. And in my perspective, I just see like, other companies doing things differently. I don't necessarily think it's justified or warranted. But again, every studio, every publisher is going to do things differently. I'll talk to you guys in another video. I want to hear your thoughts on this issue. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.